Hi, in this video I'll be painting with Manganese Blue Handmade Watercolor, currently available from Prodigal Sons, a paint maker specializing in rare, historical, and granulating colors. If you are not familiar with Genuine Manganese Blue PB33, this pigment is quite hard to find. It was discontinued by all major brands after their ingredient stockpiles ran out. One of the last watercolor brands to offer it as a single pigment was Old Holland, which sold out of their stock sometime around 2016 or 17. For the past 5 years, I've treated it as an irreplaceable treasure that I only occasionally use in video demonstrations to compare to other pigments. Da Vinci still has some PB33, which they made last longer by offering it in their manganese blue mixture, which I did not find to be a good replacement, since it seems to be mainly made up of phthalo blue, lacking the signature texture and vibrancy of pure PB33. Last year I made a video about Daniel Smith's manganese blue hue, which is the closest replica I've found. Their attempt to match the color of PB33 using a specially treated phthalo blue mixed with a clear optical brightener resulted in a blue that is brighter than normal PB15, but also a bit weaker and has a blacklight reactive fluorescent glow. It's quirky, but I appreciate it because Daniel Smith succeeded in one very important way that other brands' hues or lookalikes did not, and that was providing any semblance of granulation. Though the texture of Genuine Manganese Blue is more dramatic than what Daniel Smith's hue was able to achieve. PB33 is one of the most aggressively granulating colors I've ever seen. So it's really sad to me that so many manganese blue hue completely lack texture and paint out very smoothly. If you're a fan of granulating colors, then I highly recommend checking out Prodigal Son's Manganese Blue, since this handmade watercolor re-wets really well, has a high pigment load resulting in a flat matte finish. So many big brands add too much gum arabic and sometimes additional fillers, dispersing agents, and humectants that their paints dry shiny with all the binder gloss. Manganese Blue from Old Holland had a lot of glossy sheen from the excess binder. The only somewhat positive thing that could be said about that would be the transparency given by diluting the color with more gum arabic. Handmade paint makers tend to be more generous with the pigment load, and that can make colors, especially more opaque ones, feel a bit heavy and gouache-like. I definitely prefer this over lower pigment load formulas, but of course you could add a drop of gum arabic to your palette if for some reason you wanted a handmade paint to look a bit more transparent and glossy. PB33 has no reaction to salt. The heavy pigment particles will always sink and settle into the texture of your paper surface and not easily flow across the surface of wet washes. Manganese Blue Genuine is so eager to granulate that it can be tricky to use in multi-pigment mixtures. On wet washes, it will fully separate from lighter weight, smoother particle pigments that travel further in water. If you stir it up with a smooth color on your palette, you may find that the colors completely detach from each other. If your paper is very wet, this can be drastic and make each color that had been stirred together appear as if they were painted individually. If you paint with less water or on dry paper, you can keep PB33 a little more intertwined with your other colors. This can provide you with some incredibly textural mixtures. I personally prefer to use PB33 by itself because I appreciate it as an irreplaceably bright granulating blue, falling somewhere between azure and cyan that just can't be completely replicated by any other pigment in watercolor. Manganese blue hues are a bit more convincing as replica replacements in oils and acrylics, where they are mainly used in full-strength mass tone, and granulation texture is not the focus. In those mediums, PB33's color is fairly closely matched by phthalo blue, sometimes mixed with white. Manganese blue can function as a textural primary blue and the only granulating one ever produced with this level of intensity or vibrancy. My next favorite granulating bright blue would be PG50 paints labeled as cobalt teal or turquoise, but those are a bit more opaque, slightly less intense, green leaning, and often result in muted color mixtures. Cerulean or zirconium blues, PB35, 36, or 71, are all far more dull and light valued. Ultramarine blue or cobalt blue deep are lovely textural options, but their deep royal blue color is significantly darker valued than PB33. Manganese blue genuine pretty much provides us with a granulating alternative for phthalo blue green shade. So if you find yourself reaching for intense tropical ocean source of blues like teal or phthalos, and you really love texture, then this paint is probably a good match for you. Because its texture can be overpowering and tricky to incorporate into realism, it may lend itself better to decorative illustration or abstract work where the color itself is the focal point. Toxic byproducts created in the process of making barium manganate resulted in some environmental concerns, causing manganese blue to be phased out of production in the 1970s. Several German factories continued to manufacture it from old stock until the 1990s, where it finally became too costly compared to modern alternatives like phthalo blue, worrisome for disposal in the local environment, as well as the safety of workers that might inhale the powder. In general, the safety concerns of small watercolor pans encased in binder is pretty minor, but similarly to cobalts and cadmiums, I really only recommend this color to adults who will be careful not to airbrush or spray apply this color in a misting bottle. Don't use it for body painting or leave it out for kids and pets, and preferably wipe your brush on a scrap piece of paper before rinsing so you don't have much color going into your sink. I've seen vintage Old Holland watercolor sell for over $100 for a tiny 6 ml tube on an eBay auction, so understand that the demand for this extinct pigment is still high. This pigment is a bit like the old Quinn Gold, retaining high demand from artists who developed a fondness for its unique characteristics before most of the world's stock was depleted. Over the years, I have collected several pans of manganese blue from handmade paint makers that briefly acquired a limited amount of PB33 powder. On average, I've seen half pans sold for just over $20 from Etsy sellers like Sela Paint Company or Penholder. Prodigal Sons has a similar cost and offers a full pan option for not much more, which I immediately purchased without regret. Normally, I see these types of small handmade watercolor shops sell out of PB33 quickly and then rarely, if ever, restock them again. Knowing that the manganese blue pigment powder is a limited resource of vintage stock, I did not have high hopes of continuing to purchase it for very long. I was surprised when, well after my purchase in summer of 2021, over 6 months later, Prodigal Sons was still selling it. I emailed him to ask if he still had supply to continue for a while because I've started to make videos for other handmade paint brands in the past just to have to scrap the idea when they immediately went out of stock. I didn't want to tease anyone watching my video with something that was permanently sold out, but the shop owner Gregory assured me that he invested in a sizable amount of vintage powder from an old English pottery. Now, using this stock from the 1970s, this powder is hand mulled with gum arabic, glycerin, and clove oil, a natural preservative, so that us watercolorists can enjoy this rare pigment for a while longer. I found a ton of really beautiful natural mineral pigments and historically significant colors like Naples Yellow Genuine in Prodigal Son's Etsy shop. I plan to do separate videos swatching more of his colors in the future. I can't wait to show you the stunning sparkly cobalt glass pigment known as smalt or Dumont's blue. I'll be comparing the genuine PB32 to Winsor & Newton's smalt, which is a hue made of ultramarine violet PV15. Let me know if you're interested in pigment spotlights that include the story of how certain pigments were made, with examples of old art. I think it would be interesting to look into historical art styles and the process of making certain pigments, such as the oldest synthetic pigment invented in ancient Egypt about 5,000 years ago, called Egyptian blue or copper frit PB31. I'll do some comparisons to modern colors and see if we're able to DIY similar mixtures and determine if there's any other colors like PB33 that are difficult, if not impossible, to replicate. I have over 30 colors from this brand to show you, some of which I've never seen offered in watercolor before. Until then, find out more in the written review with swatch card pictures at kimcrick.com. I'd love to hear your thoughts on manganese blue, and tell me if you've had a chance to use it from the big watercolor brands that carried it in the past. Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to see more, you can find all of my detailed swatch card images, results from my independent Lightfast testing, and other art supply reviews on my website. I'm currently building a huge pigment database where thousands of colors can be compared side by side with paint from other brands. Updates about this project, along with line art drawings and high-res color scans, are also available on Patreon. Thanks for watching.